Hello and welcome to the Daring and Mighty podcast with me, your host, Katie Phillips. If you are a high achieving woman who desires a space to come home to herself, you are in the right place. And if you've been listening to this podcast from the beginning of season 1, you'll notice there's been quite a theme this season. And that theme is largely around identity and who we are being in the world, and how sometimes life instructs us to course correct. And in that course correction, there's a letting go of perhaps who we've been and a movement towards who we are becoming. In one of my most recent episodes, I hope you heard it, it was all about identity, and we really can only scratch the surface of identity in a 30-minute podcast episode. And today I wanted to just add another layer to that conversation, because I did in a previous episode mention a tattoo that I have on my thumb, and it's this little circle. And I mentioned that this little circle here on my thumb meant to me completion. This means completion. And I said that I'd share the story, and then I went off on a tangent and I didn't share the story. So I thought today I'd share the story, and by sharing this little story with you, I am also inviting you to take a moment and ask yourself, what am I complete with? So let's just take a breath before we dive in. And ask yourself, what am I complete with? And take a moment to listen to the whispers of your soul. Because you do know what you are complete with. It might be something very, very subtle. It might be something utterly life-changing. And you know. I was invited last May, so more than a year ago now, to a retreat in Bali. And I was being gifted this incredible experience by a friend of mine. All I had to do was get a flight, get myself there, and then everything would be covered. And the whole thing was a surprise. I didn't know the daily itinerary. I didn't know most of the women who had been invited. I knew a couple. And it was a very, very exciting experience. It was also when I was just over a year into my sacred void, and please listen back to previous episodes where I speak to that experience. So I had the time to jump on a plane and fly myself to Indonesia. I had no idea what was being laid out in front of me. As an intentional woman, I went with the decision around what this 10-day experience would resolve for me. Like I wanted to come home with answers. I wanted to come home knowing something different about myself and the projection of my life. Because I'd been in the very, very uncomfortable months of my sacred void, I was in a space of wanting answers. if you've listened to the previous episodes, you'll know that in the sacred void, you are in that kind of no man's land of identity stripping, of moving away from who you've been and moving towards who you're becoming. And I was so uncomfortable and I wanted answers. I wanted to know what was next for Katie. Part of my identity stripping was realizing how deeply I identified with being busy, with being purposeful, with being in action all the time, with being responsible for other people. I identified as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as an author. I mean, I wore so many hats that all came with so many different identities. And not that there was anything wrong with that per se. And when you are in the middle of your sacred void, you question everything. And it is a midlife piece where, in the questioning of everything, you look at who you're being in the world and how you're showing up and what you're doing with your time and how you're contributing. And you ask yourself, is this aligned for me now? I mean, I went through a phase of wondering, maybe I'm not meant to be a coach anymore. Maybe I'm not meant to go on and write the second edition of my book, which I did, and go on to write the next book, which I am doing. Maybe I'm not meant to. Maybe, I mean, I explored everything. Maybe I'll go be a real estate agent. I could do that. That'd be kind of fun. There's so many other things I could do in the world. And I was exploring all of this. I was wondering what was professionally next for me. On a personal level, I felt pretty good. It was more the professional piece. And it was also the energetics behind how I was showing up. My identity had become something of a woman in her over functioning and her constant doing and busyness. I found myself very tired from the forward motion of my energy all the time. I felt like my energy was front and forward, which was exhausting. And so, through my movement through the sacred void, I was being invited to bring my energy back and down, to really sit deep and low within myself, and to operate from that place, not that place. And if you're not watching the video of this, it might not be as clear because you can't see my body moving forward. But hopefully you can feel it in my voice. And so I went to Bali feeling excited and frustrated and wanting answers. What was Katie meant to do in the world? I had a lot of absolutely incredible, couldn't make it up, miraculous experiences when I was in Bali. And I really believe there's something about the energy of that place that is deeply transformative. It happens to also be the place where I was married to James. And in fact, the way that happened, he proposed to me by complete surprise on a little island off Lombok. And we were witnessed by very close friends and family who we were on holiday with. And 6 days later, we were married in Bali because after the proposal, everyone said, hey, why not do it now? We're all here together. So my friends arranged the entire thing and we had the most magical experience. Perhaps that's a podcast for another time. Bali has magical qualities about it, and it will tear things down, it will tear things apart, the energy there. And it has a fierce creation energy as well. And I very much surrendered to the energy of Bali on this trip. And I went with an attachment to needing answers for what was next for me. Spoiler, I didn't get the answers. That was still to come, and that wasn't going to be, defined in 10 days. But I was taken on the most magical journey. And through that journey, which included a healing from a horse, no word of a lie, I was introduced to this incredible horse. And I sat with other women in circle with this horse. Her name was Zena, and she was a rescue horse. And it turned out she was a healer. And the woman who rescued her didn't know that and didn't know anything about how horses can work with people in a healing capacity. And long story short, I found myself sat in this space with these beautiful women and this horse that, of its own free will, came and stood behind me. I was sitting on the ground, and this beautiful, majestic horse came and stood behind me. And she put her head, she arched her entire neck and head over my body so that her face was buried into my womb space. And the arch of her neck came over my head. And I felt something hard to put into words and might not sound rational. I, however, know what I felt. I felt energy move from her heart through my back, so through the back of my heart and out the front of my heart. And with that intense energy flow through my heart from hers, I felt a very powerful maternal energy. And a noise was released from my mouth. So that noise, it was primal. It sounded like a guttural moan and cry and kind of muffled scream. It was loud. I remember a little part of my brain thinking, good Lord, these women who I don't know are going to think I'm completely crazy and unhinged. And I went with it. My heart was open and something was being moved through me, and it felt like a deep reset. It felt like a heart healing. I felt my own mother's love, my mum who passed away many, many years ago now through suicide. I felt deep love from her pass through my heart, and sobs came out through my eyes, although I wasn't crying about anything in particular. It was just a movement and a release of energy through my body. And I felt activated. I didn't know for what. I just knew that it was like an initiation. Really hard to put into words. It was a feeling. And after that experience, the retreat that I was on, that was being revealed with surprises day by day by day, multiple different locations. We were at beaches, we were in the mountains, we did a long trek. On this one day, we trekked all day long in the heat through all of the rice paddies. It was absolutely incredible. And we arrived at a private and very sacred water pool and fountain and caves. And we were greeted by the local priest. And we were invited into a very special water ceremony. And like I said, it was private. This wasn't for tourists. It was completely off the beaten track. You had to hike a day to get there. And it was a surprise. I didn't know that this was coming for us that day. It was so beautiful. And again, I can't put into words what happened there. I just know that I bathed in these waters and I climbed through caves. And I remember coming up out of a cave into the light and feeling rebirthed, feeling reset and activated and initiated on a whole other level. So I'd had the Xena horse magical experience, and then I had this experience in the water and the caves in the middle of the Balinese jungle. And I received a blessing from the priest, and I felt changed again. And we're talking about energy here, energetics. I felt changed. I felt refreshed. I felt weights had been lifted from me. And I woke up one morning to the most beautiful experience with all of the women in this group who had now, we're on like day 9 of a 10-day experience together. We just sat in circle together. Nothing was planned. And one of the women intuitively asked a question of all of us. And she asked, would each of us tell the group about our mothers? Again, she hadn't planned it. No one knew it was coming. So I sat with my cup of tea and breakfast and listened to each woman share her stories of her mother. Oh my goodness, there were tears. And I got to talk about my mum, and I shared everything that she loved in the world. And it was so beautiful to speak about the woman that she was without speaking about the pain that she had been in and the difficulties she'd experienced and what led to her choosing to take her own life. I just spoke about the incredible woman that she was. I think I probably talked about how she liked to wear an akubra hat. It's a very Aussie hat, if you don't know. I think I probably shared that she wasn't a huge fan of scuba diving, but she liked to sit on the ocean floor and feed the fish. And she loved horse riding, and she loved the Australian outback, and she loved the English countryside, and she loved cups of tea, and she loved scones, and she loved her friends, and she loved our cats. I spoke about my mom in that way, and it just released my heart, because so often the conversation around her was about the awfulness that led to the tragic and shocking end to her life. And as I shared these stories with this incredible open-hearted group of women, and I tell you, there is something about being witnessed by a group of women that on its own, no therapy, no coaching, just witnessing, it's transformational. And I cried, and I cried tears of joy and happiness for the woman that my mother was, who died so young at the age of 49. And in a moment, I was given a word that escaped my mouth. I didn't think it and choose to say it. This word escaped my mouth. Or you could say it was a sentence, and it was, I'm complete. The energy was completion. And it turns out my time in Bali, which came right at the middle of my experience of the sacred void, was about coming to completion. And I can put words to it now in a way that I probably couldn't have back then. And it was, I came to completion with my soul contract with my mum. Now, that might be a familiar term to you. You might be wondering, what the hell is this crazy woman talking about? And I believe that we have soul families, and I believe that before we incarnate to have this human experience, we make contracts with other members of our soul family, and we choose to play roles in each other's lives in the human experience so that each of us receive the soul growth and evolution that we come here for. And I believe I had a soul contract with my mum, and the way her life went and the way it ended was not only traumatic and difficult for both of us, it was also the instigator of a huge body of healing work for me that led me to doing the work that I do in the world. And I felt on this morning in Bali, surrounded by these beautiful women, that soul contract had come to a completion. And when I realized that, I felt released. I felt free, because the work I'd been doing in the world for all of those years, and the story I told proudly, and I will still say this to you now proudly, was I was guided to showing women how to come home to themselves and how to love themselves in honor of my mum, who didn't get to have that experience. She didn't get to come home to herself, and she didn't get to love herself in a way that would have changed the entire trajectory of her life. So in honor of her, and in honor of my own self-love journey on the back of her death, that was the story. That's why I did what I did in the world. It's why I wrote a book called The Self-Love Affair. That was my why for very, very many years. And on completion of our soul contract, that no longer needed to be my why. And that felt okay. I felt that I could begin a brand new relationship with my mom, albeit, yes, she is in another realm. I feel her with me often and receive messages through other people from her often. My relationship with her got to be renewed. It was no longer about what was. It was just this clean, clear connection without contract, if that makes any sense. And so I was released. And whatever I was to do next in the world wasn't attached to the story of mum. Whatever I was to do next was a reflection of who Katie is now. And of course, who Katie is now, this is the story of mum, is still part of me and my history, and part of my original why. And it's not my why now. So I went to Bali wanting answers. I didn't come away knowing what my next big professional career move was, but I did come away knowing that I was complete, and I marked it with this little circle tattoo on my thumb. I was complete with that soul contract, and I was free to create whatever my heart desired, whatever makes my heart happy, whatever feels expansive and daring and mighty for me. And here I am sharing this story with you on the newly released Daring and Mighty podcast. And apparently, this here now is part of the tapestry of what I'm to create going forward. I didn't know that when I was in Bali. We don't know the how. Our only job is to surrender and keep our hearts open and allow ourselves to be shown the way. And so much of the work I'm doing in the world is helping women clear out the things that are standing in their way so that they can hear their way forward. And I tell you, it continues to be an honor and a privilege. It really does. So I'm so glad to have been able to finally share that little story with you today on completion. And I wonder for you what you are coming to completion with. And maybe it's the way you've been moving through the world. Like I shared with you, for me, it was moving through the world with that forward, intense driving energy. And maybe it's time to come to completion with that and find a different way to come back into balance with yourself and find a balance of your masculine and feminine energy. Maybe it's letting go of a soul contract or coming to completion with it. Maybe you too are completing something at that level. Maybe it's a job you need to let go of. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a belief system. Maybe it's a habit. But you'll know. What are you ready to be complete with? What are you ready to say no more to and draw a line under? I will leave you with that question. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that there was something special that you received from my little story share. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. If you have any friends that you think would be inspired by what I shared today, please do share this episode with them. And that just leaves me to say, you are daring and mighty.